It's time to chill out and get ready for a mediocre Q&A live stream. If you're old enough, grab yourself your favorite adult beverage, and if you're not, stick with apple juice. Put your feet up and relax. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. And now let's cue up the intro music. Hey everybody, welcome to the HVACR Videos live stream. I am your host Chris, and I realized that my chair that I usually hide from the screen is in the view. That bothers me. Just knowing that that chair is there is driving me insane. I'm not concerned about the rest of my messy office or the chaos that's going on everywhere, but that single chair right there, if I do not move it, I will just go insane. So excuse me for a moment. Pretend you saw nothing. There we go. I feel much better now. So I am back from nice, sunny, warm Chicago, Illinois. My goodness gracious. Those of you that warned me about Chicago, whew, boy, you guys, you weren't lying. It was a bit chilly there. So just got back from the AHR Expo in Chicago, and it was a pretty good time. Pretty good time. I'm definitely going to cover a few things, but let's tell some fun stories real quick. So one of the really interesting things when I had left for Chicago was when I left Southern California. I flew out of my local commuter airport, and it was raining. And I happened to notice, and I don't have the pictures to show, but I'll make a post about it or something. But I happened to notice that there was a bunch of guys working on the tarmac. And it was just kind of funny because I felt a little bad for the guys, kind of felt a little guilty as I was sitting in the airport lounge looking out, on the tarmac, and I see these guys out there just standing out in the rain. But what I noticed was one of the guys was wearing shorts. Okay. Fast forward to all my connecting flights. And by the time I actually landed in Chicago later that evening, people weren't dressed in shorts. Okay. There was about 3 to 4 inches of snow on the ground. Of course, they don't have it on the runway, but all around everywhere, there was about 3 to 4 inches of snow at the airport. And it was a bit chilly. I'm walking from the Skyway into the airport itself, and I was like, whoa, okay. Yeah, this is a little bit different. I definitely traveled like a typical person from California probably would, because I was wearing sweats and Crocs and a big sweatshirt. And then I had to bundle up, to leave the airport. But it was definitely a contrasting experience to see the difference between leaving Ontario, California, and landing in Chicago. Now, I landed last Saturday, and last Saturday? No, I don't know. Whenever I landed, I can't even remember how long I was there. But anyways, regardless, when I landed, it was about -4, -5 degrees outside. And then over the next day and a half, it warmed up for the show. Monday through Wednesday, it was in the 40s. So it was actually really nice for the show. But one really interesting factoid was I had to go into the expo where the show's at before any of the public got to go in there, because I had to set up a bunch of live streaming stuff at the Parker Sporlin booth, who, thank you very much, Parker Sporlin, for hosting me in the way that they did, because it was an awesome event. But if you go into the AHR Expo in Chicago, 2 days before the actual show opens, they have all the giant dock doors open into the expo. And I was bundled up. It was somewhere in the 30s to 40s in there. And it was pretty darn cold. And I was told by the people that I was at the Parker Sporlin booth with the day before that it was so cold in there that they had bottles of water that were freezing. Like, it's insane. And then, of course, once the expo started, the doors all shut. The heaters, really started to warm the area up, and it was much nicer once you got, 30 something thousand people in there. I haven't heard the exact numbers yet, but I would have to estimate that the show totals are going to be somewhere around 60,000 people, if not a little bit more. I would say probably on the first day, there was probably 30 to 40,000 people there in 2 giant expo halls. It was a lot of people. And it was a bit overwhelming, to say the least. So welcome to the show. All right. I'm going to see what's going on in the chat right now. If you guys have any questions or comments or things that you want me to cover, please put your questions in caps lock, and I will try to get to them. Also, if you guys have any questions, things that I can't cover or don't cover, feel free to shoot me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com. Okay. Let's see what else we got going on in here. Reading through here. Did Adam try and run a heat load calc? No, not on the Expo Center. He definitely didn't try to do that. Have I ever worked on Southern Case Arts equipment? No, I can't say that I have, Adam. Reading through here right now. All right, cool. So, everybody that's just getting in here right now, my name is Chris. I'm an HVACR service technician. I would assume that you know who I am, but I'm sure we got some new people in here too. So, I do these live streams to kind of consolidate questions from the videos that I post. To try to save my sanity a little bit and just consolidate questions into one place and try to answer some of the repetitive questions that I see, and then also cover a couple other things and talk about a few things. And then clearly I want to get to your guys' points and questions that you want me to cover too. So let's see. It says, thank you for sharing. I am new to the profession and have learned a lot from my videos. Well, thank you. I don't know how to pronounce your name. Is it Ta Tran? I don't know if I'm, butchering that, and I apologize if I am, but right on. That's really awesome. I really appreciate that you like the video. So, it was really cool too. So, everything HVACR, Steve's in here. And, so I have to say, Steve, I don't know if I got to tell you the story or not, but I don't know if I knew you were coming to the show or not, but I was actually really looking forward to meeting you. I know we didn't get to really hang out very much. I wish we would have kind of, had a little more time, but I was just super busy. But I saw some pictures of Steve and Ryan and Rick all sitting down having dinner. And I was like, oh, man, I didn't know Steve was here. And it just so happened that I was able to connect with Rick the next day, and Steve was still there. And it was really cool to get to shake your hand finally. So, just as much as, another person that consumes content, there's other creators that I haven't met yet. Steve obviously makes his own content, and it was really neat to be able to go shake his hand and talk to him for a minute. So it was really cool. And, my wife had to remind me, because I told her that story, and it's kind of the same way. Like, I didn't understand, and I still to this day don't understand why people want to come up and shake my hand. It just doesn't make sense to me. Yet here I am wanting to go shake Steve's hand. So go figure, right? My brain is so odd the way that it works, and sometimes I can't process things the way that probably I would assume other people can. I don't know. It's just kind of bizarre. But yeah, it is what it is. So I'm a human being and I'm unique, right? All right, let's see what else. Can I go over the operating pressures? Yeah, definitely, Ron. I will. Okay. And Ron had actually asked me a question about that. So let me cross this off the list. Before I forget, just before I was getting ready for the live stream, I stumbled across something, and I have to say, I just don't know how much I like it or not. Okay. I'm sure I'll enjoy the movie, but they are recreating a timeless classic that it's almost sacrilege to recreate. Like, it's kind of a bummer that they're recreating this. Although I do have to say that I do like Jake Gyllenhaal. He's a cool actor, really neat dude. But they're recreating Patrick Swayze's Roadhouse. And I happened to see it just before the stream started. And I watched the trailer and I was like, oh, it was maybe the movie's going to be better. I'm a big movie buff if you guys don't know it. Okay. But Patrick Swayze's Roadhouse has to be one of my all-time favorite movies, like absolutely all time. As corny as it is, as horrible as the acting is, it's just a great movie. And then to see them remake it, I just don't know if I'm going to like it or not. I'm definitely going to watch it though. I think it's going to be an Amazon movie too. So interesting point that I happened to see just before the stream. So Ron had sent me a message and he was curious if I would talk about operating pressures as far as 404 and 134A refrigeration equipment goes. Okay. So Ron, what I'm going to tell you first and foremost is you always want to lean on the manufacturers of the equipment. If you're trying to work on a reach-in refrigerator, you always want to call the manufacturer and ask them how their units operate, because what you will find is that there's not just one set way for a unit to operate. There's not just one unit that's going to operate with these exact pressures, and it's not going to be cookie cutter all across the board. Each manufacturer beats to the tune of their own drum. Each manufacturer, and how is that possible, right? Because refrigeration is refrigeration. Well, some manufacturers design their boxes differently, right? They might design the box to have a different overall evaporator to condenser TD match. Okay, so if you oversize the condenser and then have an evaporator that's a little bit smaller, then the overall combined TD of the equipment is going to be different. Okay, so you always want to lean on the manufacturer first. But the one thing that I want to point out is your question was, what are the operating pressures of 404? What are the operating pressures of 134A? I would highly suggest that you start looking at the temperatures as opposed to the pressures. Okay. Really, pressures are, it's kind of hard to follow pressures because, again, you're going to have issues with every manufacturer doing something different with the way that they design their equipment. If you're working on a walk-in cooler, your combined TDs are typically going to be a lot lower than if you're working on a reach-in cooler, where they tend to design the system for the combined TDs to be much bigger. So it's really important that you reach out to the manufacturer. So say you're working on a true reach-in cooler, call True and ask them some things. Now, some other things that I want you to understand for everybody out there that works on reach-in coolers, I challenge you to call a manufacturer tomorrow and ask them, okay, what the evaporator superheat should be, what the condenser subcooling should be. And they're going to say, we don't publish that. Reach-in cooler manufacturers hardly ever pay attention to subcooling or superheat. Most of the time, they will tell you just pressures, okay? Now, I know I said don't pay attention to pressures, but what I'm going to challenge you to do is call and ask a series of questions. So if I'm going to call True Refrigeration tomorrow, they're a major refrigerator manufacturer. I'm going to call them and I'm going to say, hey, I'm working on a TSSU 48, whatever, right? That's a 48-inch wide prep table, okay? And I'm going to say, hey, the unit's running and I'd like to know what your operating pressures are. And what True's going to tell me is they're going to say, at a set ambient temperature, typically about 75 degrees, they want suction pressure to be this, discharge pressure to be that, and they want the box temperature to be this. Okay, with those 4 data points right there, you can actually figure out, backwards calculate what their TD on that equipment should be. And with that information, you can actually do a lot of valuable stuff, and you can start to understand how the box operates under different load conditions. So you see, the manufacturers, they will tell you pressures, but they'll only tell you pressures at a set temperature inside the box, at a set temperature outside of the box, and then they expect the pressures to be in line. So if I take the ambient conditions that they say 75 to 80 degrees, okay, then I take the condenser pressure, I can backwards convert that pressure to a saturation temperature, right? And then take the ambient temperature and the saturation temperature, and I can figure out the condenser TD, and then do the same thing for the evaporator TD. And with that information, I can now go to that same refrigerator and I can say, hey, if I know the condenser TD is 10 degrees and I know the evaporator TD is 35 degrees, then I can look and figure out what the manufacturer would want the pressures to be at different operating conditions and not just at their published 75 degree ambient, 34 degree box temp. Okay. So I don't know what the pressure should be on a 404A cooler for true. I don't. Okay. But I can call the manufacturer and again, figure out the TD, and then I can backwards calculate it for the varying conditions. And I hope that kind of makes sense to you. Another thing that I would highly suggest you do is start paying attention to, that kind of valuable information and start writing it down, logging it somewhere. Okay. So that way, the next time you go work on a TSSU 48 or whatever, insert name, model number, whatever it is of whatever cooler you're working on, you can store that and have that data to share with the next guy. Okay. So, and also there's a lot of things that change too. Does the box have a capillary tube? Does it have, expansion valve? Now, I will say also, you're asking about 404 and 134A. You're actually not going to run into very much 404 and 134A when it comes to prep tables. The only 404 and 134A equipment you're going to run into when it comes to prep tables is stuff that is typically 15, 20 years and older. Everything that has been made within the last 5 to 10 years is going to be hydrocarbon refrigerants when it comes to reach-in coolers. You're going to be dealing with R290. If you're working on domestic appliances and homes and different things, it's going to be R600 isobutane, okay? So there's a lot of different stuff happening in the industry, and it seems like every single day there's a new flavor of refrigerant, okay? So I hope that kind of gives you a general idea and some troubleshooting information and help you a little bit more. Okay. And if you have any more questions, feel free to, your best bet actually is to send me an email, hvacrvideos@gmail.com. Okay. Now, for the most part, the only time that I'm really, really concerned with pressures is when I'm trying to backwards calculate how the manufacturer designed that equipment and when I'm setting pressure controls. Okay. Because pressure controls operate based off of pressures. Okay. And so that's really important too. All right, let's see what else we got going on in the chat right now. See what I'm missing in here. Okay, yeah. How does a solenoid valve on a split system AC unit stop oil migration, and what controls the valve? Human rights revolution, it's actually not stopping oil migration, it's stopping refrigerant migration, okay? Because when you have refrigerant migration, let's say that you have in an off cycle, you have a system that does not have a liquid line solenoid valve on a residential air conditioning system. We're making it as simple as possible. What'll happen is the liquid refrigerant in the system will migrate to different spots in the system. If that liquid refrigerant migrates to the compressor and it sits there in the crankcase of the compressor because it's super cold, when that compressor turns on, that oil will start to mix with the liquid refrigerant. The liquid refrigerant will become like entrapped in the oil. And when the compressor starts, that first, movement of whether it be a scroll compressor or a piston driven compressor is going to take that liquid refrigerant and it's going to foam it up like crazy, and it's going to grab the oil with the liquid refrigerant and it's going to throw it out of that compressor out the discharge line. And if the system's not properly piped, okay, that oil is going to get stuck and logged somewhere else in the system. And then a lot of bad things can happen when that happens. So it's not so much about oil migration as it is about liquid refrigerant migration that is going to mix with the oil and then take the oil with it when the compressor starts up. That's the biggest concern. And so when you have a liquid line solenoid valve there in the off cycle, it helps to prevent refrigerant migration. Okay. Very important thing. All right. Let's see what else we got going on in the chat right now. Reading through the chat. I am blurry as heck on the stream. All network equipment on your end is okay. Well, that's a bummer. Let me see what's going on here. Let's see. Internet speed test. I'm pretty ugly anyways, so it's probably not a big deal if I'm blurry, right? I mean, my download speed is extremely well. Let's see what my upload speed is 40 megabits per second at the moment. So I don't know why. Maybe there's a problem with YouTube. It seems like my internet speed is perfect. So who knows? As someone says, it's fine now. Who knows? Yeah, I don't know. All right. Got a couple other things I want to cover. Ooh, let's talk about the elephant in the room. You guys ever do a drunk text? You guys ever text someone when you're drunk? You ever send a message out that maybe doesn't have the right context and people misunderstand it in different ways? I did that the other day. But there was a lot of factual and truthful information in my post that I made the other day. So if you don't know, if you don't follow my social media feeds on Facebook and on YouTube, and it wasn't a drunk text, I'm joking when I say that, being sarcastic, but I made a post. I called it what did I call it? My observations of my travels or something like that. Okay. And I made a post kind of talking about what I experienced when I went to the AHR Expo. And I'll kind of recap it a little bit. I encourage you guys to go read it. Okay. First and foremost, you need to understand something, that I'm a human. Okay. And I don't regret anything that I wrote in the post. I don't take back anything that I wrote in the post. That is 100% how I felt. Okay. We all feel differently. I just got back from the AHR Expo. I was, feeling a little like overwhelmed from the whole experience. And I wrote a post just with my observations. And what I observed when I landed in Chicago was, that there was a lot of homeless people in the airport. And then and I don't take, nobody that's watching this right now, please don't take this political. If people start taking it political and posting political stuff in the chat, moderators, please delete it. Okay. We don't need to get political. I'm observing as a human. Okay. And what I observed was that there was a lot of homeless people in the airport. And then I observed that there was homeless people on the streets with little children. It was -4, -5 degrees outside. And it made me feel bad because I saw little children. And then when I got home, right, I, just kind of had this surreal feeling as I was sitting in my home with my kids in their bedrooms, and it was 72, 73 degrees outside. And I'm sitting here thinking, man, I kind of felt guilty because my kids aren't cold, but some other people's kids are cold. There's a lot of circumstances that lead to that. We don't need to get into that. Bottom line, it was sad. It was sad seeing people, and I felt bad. Now, there's a lot of things that I can do, and there's a lot of things that I already do that I don't talk about, because I don't talk about everything about my personal life. But the one bottom line is, you have to admit it was sad that there was little children, and I'm talking toddlers, that were out in the streets when it was -4 degrees outside. Like, that's a bummer. Okay. Again, there's a lot of reasons as to why, but it was just an observation that I noticed. And I kind of wrote up this big old opinion piece about it. And it's just kind of a bummer, So, again, I don't regret putting the post out there. I realized that without context, a lot of people don't understand my intent with the post. I wasn't virtue signaling. Okay. I made some people were saying that I was virtue signaling. Yeah, I'm not even going to get into that, but that was just silly. But it was just an observation of mine. And it was just kind of a bummer to see that kind of stuff, right? There's homeless people everywhere. And I also mentioned that in my thing. I even thought for a moment that the homeless people in California were better off than the homeless people in Chicago. Okay. Now we're going to get onto something else, but I do just wanted to address it, right? I'm not going to retract anything that I said. It was just kind of a moving moment to be able to see something like that. And it's just kind of crazy and surreal. Okay. But one thing I will say, and again, we'll move on to the next subject, was that was before the show. And this is where this really hits home. Okay. That was before the show. And that was Saturday and Sunday that I saw those people on the streets. They were not on the streets. Those families were not on the streets Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday when the show went on. Okay, just think about that for a minute. They weren't there. And it was warmer Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, but they were out when it was super cold. So go figure, right? All right. So as far as AHR goes, what was my overall thoughts of AHR? It was an amazing show. If you guys go back to the beginning of the stream and you watch the beginning of this, you will see that I did kind of like a photo dump where I showed all the photos that I had taken with people. That was a very humbling experience to have people want to come up and talk to me and share with me. And I hope that if you experienced coming up and talking to me, you understood that every person that came up and talked with me, I gave them every ounce of my time that they wanted. I wanted to make sure, because that's what those shows are about, right? It's a show for me to go and hang out at a booth and get to, interact with people and talk with them. And I try my best to give every person that wanted to come up and talk to me every single moment of my time that they wanted, right? So, you know, some person I might have spent 20 minutes talking to, one person I might have spent a minute talking to. It was however they wanted the conversation to go. And I try to do that when I can, right? And it was a good experience. I got to hear some interesting stories. I got to talk with some people from all around the world, and that blew my mind. Literally talking to people coming from the islands below Florida, and you know, people coming from all over the place. On the way home, I talked to a gentleman that was traveling back to Shanghai that works for Bitzer compressors. It was an interesting, amazing conversation that I had with this gentleman, and it was really, really cool. So one thing about these events that I genuinely like is the community, the ability to be able to put a face to face with these people that may or may not consume my content, right? And then also new people, and get to have discussions and talk about different problems that we have as far as the HVAC industry goes. And that is really, really awesome. So if you did come up to me and shake my hand and take a picture with me, thank you very much. I enjoyed it just as much as you did. Okay. All right. Let's see what else we got going on in the chat. Reading through here right now. See what I got. Reading through. Have I had an issue? Oh no, that's for someone else. How do I feel about soft start compressor units worth the money? Dale Marr, is there actually a piece of a tool out there or a piece of equipment out there that is a true soft starter? My research says that most of the devices out there that people call soft starters aren't truly a soft starter. So I would do your research to find out. Okay. If you truly want to do something like soft starting something, I mean, what's the point? Just put in a VFD if you need to get to that point. I mean, I guess, I don't know. You know, I would do some research because I've heard some information and read some information. I'm not educated enough on the subject to know which one's the best and which one works the best. So I don't know. You know, you have to do some research, but I will say that one of the major manufacturers out there that makes soft starters, from what I've been told, it's not a true soft starter. So, all right, let's see what else we got going on in the chat. What am I missing? What product or equipment interested me the most at AHR? I do have to tell you a funny story about a manufacturer that I went up and talked to. So I usually don't get like this too much, and I'm not going to say the entire manufacturer is a horrible company, because they're not. Okay, I know they have good people that work at their company, but I will say I had some genuine questions about the Carrier equipment that I installed in my house. I just installed a new heat pump in my house, and I've been commissioning it, and there was some things that just didn't make sense to me. So I went up to the Carrier booth. I found the residential side, and I went up and I asked them. I talked to a rep from the company, and I said, hey, I got some questions. I just installed a piece of equipment in my house, and I gave them the rundown. And first off, which just dumbfounded me, absolutely dumbfounded me. The first question that I asked him, he said, well, we usually don't give that information to homeowners. And I said, homeowners? What homeowner is going to come to the AHR trade show and ask really in-depth technical questions about the equipment that they said they just installed, like I did, and then get blown off to say, we don't give that information to homeowners? What? So then I told the guy, I'm not a homeowner, dude. I installed my equipment. Like, come on. And I'm not name dropping. I'm not saying that I'm from HVACR videos or any of that crap. I just said I installed some equipment. And then I told him, I said, you know, I'm having a hard time getting information from tech support. And I said, you know, I bought my equipment from a certain distributor. I mean, I'll say it, it's Russell Sigler, right? Because that's my distributor. It's not too hard to find that out. And when I told him that, I said, you know, do you have someone that I can ask these hard hitting questions to? Because they're pretty technical. Is there someone at the booth that I can talk to? And he says, well, you know, you got to go through Russell Sigler. And I said, come on, man, like, you're here. Can you not answer these questions? And he's like, no, I can't. You need to go through Russell Sigler. And I'm like, you really going to be like that? And he's like, yeah, no, we can't help you with that. And I'm like, okay. So that representative, I'm not blaming the entire company, but that representative, or their policy that they have, that he wouldn't answer my questions about certain things within my system, that was kind of lame, right? That really was. And I'm not saying that I would never install Carrier. I mean, so far I'm extremely happy with the system in my house, but I do got to say these manufacturers that put up these walls and these barriers between the technicians that are installing them and the people that design them, it's a bit silly. They should be a little bit more forthcoming with the information. So that's one observation that I got from the show that I was a little bit disturbed with, was like, for real, you guys can't give me some genuine information. I will say, not just a knock on them, my buddy Adam, same thing. He went up to Amana and asked some hard-hitting questions from the Amana booth, and he hit a brick wall too. And it's like, for real? You would think that we would have an opportunity to ask, to have these questions answered about our equipment. And to have the manufacturers not give us really good answers about the equipment is a bit silly. Actually, it wasn't Amana equipment. It was Daikin equipment. Well, Daikin Amana, same thing, right? Yeah. So, but anyways, yeah, still a bit silly. So yeah, it'll definitely lose some customers. And it was just a bit silly with that one. So it is funny because then Adam, my buddy Adam Muffich from the Overtime show, he happened to say, just like, I didn't say anything. And then Adam said, that he filmed this whole process and explained who I was. And I was like, that's irrelevant. They don't need to know that I filmed this process and I'm a content creator. I was going up just asking as a technician and a business owner that purchased and installed their equipment. I was trying to ask some hard-hitting questions, and I just couldn't get the questions answered. I don't like to go out and name drop or anything like that. That's a bit silly, but yeah. And then J.R. Smith says maybe that rep was not a tech rep. Exactly. Maybe he wasn't. But again, when I said, is there someone else that I can talk to? He says, no, you need to talk to your distributor. And it's like, come on, man. But he did answer some other questions, which implied that he had some knowledge about my equipment. So it was a bit silly. To be fair, too, I was asking him some questions as to why I was having a few issues. Like, for instance, my airflow that's, shown on my my Infinity thermostat or Infinity wall control is not accurate. Now, I assume it's not accurate because my total external static pressure on my system is so low. I'm running like 0.37 total external static. And I've read some information that says when you run under 0.5, the CFMs that's displayed on the wall control can be a little skewed. And okay, that kind of makes sense. But I was just kind of genuinely asking them some questions about that and setting some airflow and different things. And I don't know. I was just a little disappointed in that. But overall, what did I find amazing about the show? Well, to be fair, I really didn't get to see much of the show because I spent a lot of my times, the entire day on Monday, the entire day on Tuesday, at different booths interacting with people. My only time to really walk the show and see the show was for a couple hours on Wednesday that my good friend Adam and I kind of walked the show. And to be honest, it was a little overwhelming. Like, that show is just insane how big it is. It's so insane. What was really neat, I will say, really funny thing is that, we had just had the Blue On reps, and we'll talk about it on the Overtime show a little bit more, but we had just had the Blue On reps, the president of the company, and then a gentleman named, oh shoot, I can't think of his name right now. Dang it, it's slipping my mind. I can't think of the really cool dude from Blue On. Anyways, but we had the two of them on. And so Adam and I on Wednesday, when we were walking the show, we went over to the Blue On booth to say hi to them and shake their hands, and they had left. So that was kind of funny. There was nobody at the booth. It was empty. They went home early. So I was all, hey, Blue On, where you at? That was kind of funny. Dylan was his name, I think, was the gentleman. Yeah, anyways, but yeah, that was kind of funny. Let's see what else we got going on in the chat. Where was the Overtime show last week? Oh, we were just tired. We had all just got home from AHR. Adam's computer wasn't working. I wasn't feeling good. I'm getting over a cold right now that I'd caught at AHR. So yeah, it's just silly. Let's see what else we got going on in here. All right, cool. So I made a short form video where I was going up onto the roof, and I had mentioned that I had a backpack tool bag. And I mentioned that it would be a smart idea to put the backpack on as opposed to just climbing the ladder and one-handing it. Okay. Common sense comes into play when you have a backpack or when you're going up a roof ladder, but your safety really needs to be important. And I can't stress this enough. And I'm going to tell a little story real quick. And some of you may have heard this story, but I don't know, it's probably close to 10 years ago now, maybe 8 years ago. I fell off a ladder at a restaurant. Okay. I was one-handing it. I had pretty sure I had a bucket in one hand, and I was climbing up a ladder where you go 1, 2, 3, and then you pull, and then you reach, and 1, 2, 3, and then you pull and you reach. I had a bucket in my other hand, and I missed the top rung of the ladder, literally missed it, and I fell. I fell backwards. And as I fell backwards, I remember a lot of thoughts went through my head, but the most prevalent thought that went through my head was, I don't have enough money saved up for this to happen. Okay. And I knew that I was going to fall down, right? I'm falling backwards. And next thing you know, I landed on a chain link fence safety cage that was over the back dock. In the short form video that I posted just the other day, that was not the same one, but it was a similar one. This restaurant has an enclosed in safety cage over the back dock, so that way they can be down there and be safe and then have stuff and nobody can steal it, right? So I landed on a safety cage instead of falling all the way down to the concrete. It was very, very lucky on my part because I didn't land on any of the metal beams. I landed literally on the chain link fence like a hammock and just laid there and stared as my coworkers were up on the roof looking down at me. And I was like, holy moly, right? And then also there was a giant steel beam sticking up that caught the roof hatch ladder access that folded back, and that landed like right next to my head. So I could have hit that too, but I didn't. Okay. And that moment changed a lot of things about what I do when I work. I could have been severely injured. I mean, I don't know if it would have been that extreme, but I guess I could have died, right? If I'd have fallen down and hit my head in the right way or something like that. And I was very lucky and fortunate. We tend in this trade, I think for a long time, it was drilled into our heads, me included, that, you got to hurry, you got to get it done, all this stuff, but your safety needs to come first and you need to make sure you take care of yourself. So I made a post the other day saying, hey, I was about to climb a roof hatch. I put a backpack on, climbed up, got a lot of people saying, well, their companies don't allow you to wear backpacks. Then that's fine if they don't allow you to wear a backpack. And then I got a lot of people saying those backpacks can be too heavy. Yeah, if you're an idiot and you put way too much stuff in your backpack, sure, it can get way too heavy. Common sense comes into play here, right? If my backpack is way overloaded, then yeah, I'm going to rope it up. But if I don't have a lot of weight in my backpack, I'm going to put it on, I'm going to strap it on, and I'm going to climb up the ladder, having 3 points of contact at all time like I'm supposed to, okay? This industry has, depending on where you're at, regulations that govern our safety, but then at the same time, common sense needs to trump the regulations when it comes to certain things, right? You need to make sure that you're looking out for yourself. And just because there's a regulation doesn't mean that you still can't do things that are dangerous. So that's where common sense comes into play. If you don't feel safe at work, don't do it. All right. Now, your company may have a discussion about why you don't feel safe doing something that's perfectly acceptable. But bottom line is, your body and what your capabilities are. And if you don't feel safe, don't ever put yourself in a position where you don't feel comfortable, right? Just say no and, talk to your boss and figure out a better way to do things. Okay. So just remember that you always want to stay safe. See what else we got going on in the chat right now. What am I missing here? Yeah, you can't do your job on your back. That's right. 100%. Yeah, I was a very, very lucky person and I didn't get hurt. I was extremely lucky. And, it's funny though, the things that go through your head, I literally remember I don't have enough money saved up for this to happen. That's what I thought when I fell. So pretty crazy. Remember, no matter how much the company says you're the one, you will be replaced. I mean, there is truth in that, J.R. Smith, but also understand I'm a business owner, right? So, I have employees that work for me and those employees are part of my team. Okay. My team consists of multiple people. If one person gets hurt and they can't come to work, yes, work must go on. And yes, we would have to replace them because the rest of the team still needs to be able to work 100%. So yes, you do need to look out for you do need to look out for yourself, but also don't forget that you need to be able to work on a team too. And part of working with the company is being part of a team. So always protect yourself. Don't let people put you in a position where you have to get hurt, but you also need to look out for the rest of your team and keep that in mind. being a jerk to people, to customers at work is going to affect the team because you might lose a customer. There's a lot of different things that go on, right? So yes, it is true that if someone got hurt and couldn't work anymore, they would have to be replaced, right? Because there's more people on that team that still need to be able to provide for their family. So it's not just like a really, there's a lot of truth, and people say that all the time. You'll be replaced the moment that you die. And there is truth in that. But also, I mean, there's other people that need to continue to be employed, right? So it's not just like this negative thing, like a company's just out to get you. But there is companies out there like that. So you always need to find a good company that you feel like, treats you like part of the team. When was the last time, Scott, HVAC rookie? You didn't need to do that super chat, but he said, when was the last time I sanitized my phone? That's a good question, Scott. I don't think I've sanitized my phone since I got home from AHR. So good point. Good point. And that's Scott saying that because I made a joke talking to them or something when he was walking away. I was like, when's the last time you sanitized your phone? I asked him that. And then yet here I am grabbing my phone without sanitizing it. So pretty good point you made there. So while I was at the Parker Sporland booth, I did a lot of live streams from their booth. And one of the things we were discussing A2L refrigerants a lot because A2Ls are super hot right now. And I came to this realization when we were having one of the discussions about A2L refrigerants, and it was kind of like epiphany, mind explosion. I'm going to ask you guys in the chat, have you heard a lot of people, a lot of training organizations, a lot of manufacturers talking about A2L refrigerants? Okay. I have. I've been hearing a lot. But let me ask you this. Before the A2L refrigerants were coming really popular, did you hear a lot of people talking about A3 refrigerants? For the most part, A3s are propane, R600, isobutane, R290s propane. There was a lot of hype, but not as much as the A2Ls. And it is kind of funny because I just came to this epiphany. In refrigeration, we've been working with A3 refrigerants, which are highly flammable refrigerants. Propane, unodorized propane. That's what we work with in most of the small refrigerators out there. There's a lot of safety things to be concerned about with it. But once you get working on it, it's not that big of a deal. You just kind of follow the safety practices like it's second nature. But with the A2L refrigerants, I mean, they're legitimately putting leak detectors in A2L refrigerant equipment. Okay. So that way, if there's a leak coming, if it senses a leak in the equipment, it's going to close valves to isolate that particular piece of equipment. So that way, only minimal amounts of refrigerant are going to vent. A2Ls are mildly flammable refrigerants. Okay. Let me ask the chat right now. What's one of the most popular A2L refrigerants that you guys can name right now? Okay. I'm going to give you guys a second to name it in the chat. What's one of the most popular A2L refrigerants? I'm going to give you a hint. Daikin's using it. Okay. Daikin's adopted it as their A2L of choice. Let's see what the chat has to say. Joey and Al Anonymous says R32. Okay. That's the exact refrigerant I was looking for. So R32 is an A2L refrigerant. If any of you guys do air conditioning, you guys have been working with R32 for probably the last 10 to 15 years, and you just didn't know it, okay? Because R32 is one of the main ingredients in 410A, okay? 410A consists of two refrigerants. I think it's R125A and R32 that consist the two refrigerants, and that makes up 410A, okay? We've already been working with A2L refrigerants, just not as a pure A2L. So R32 is now being used as a standalone refrigerant without the 125 mixed into it. Forgive my numbers. I'm not an expert when it comes to those, but we've already been working with it for a very long time. There is some safety practices, and I understand, and it has been pointed out to me that, the refrigeration industry, we're not putting that, well, we are putting it in consumers' homes, but there's just a little bit more regulation and hype about residential type applications with the A2Ls. So that's why they're talking about this, but it still just kind of makes me laugh because there was not this much of an uproar in training and different stuff when it came to the A3 refrigerants. Okay. But with the A2Ls that are mildly flammable, they're just like, oh my gosh, the world is ending. It's kind of silly. So, R290 is an A3. No, that's what I'm saying. Did I say R290 was an A3? No, there is, and that's what I said. A2Ls contain absolutely no R290. That's another point of contention. There's a lot of people out there, and I will say, I hate to throw people under the bus, but supply houses are one of the biggest, sources of incorrect information. Okay. Supply houses, and I've heard this from a lot of people, have been spreading a lot of false information. There is no propane in A2L refrigerants. And for the foreseeable future, right now, you are not going to be retrofitting existing operating systems to A2L refrigerants, meaning you're not going to go over to your mom's and take out the 410A and put in R32 into an operating system. That's not going to happen at this point in time right now, okay? You're only going to be using A2L refrigerants in brand new, properly designed systems that are, set up for the A2L refrigerants. So understand that too. A2L refrigerants at this point in time are not a drop-in for 410A. They're not going to be just, going up on a roof, recovering the gas and putting in an A2L. That's not how it's going to be. You're only going to have A2Ls in systems that were designed for it. Okay. So keep that in mind. And again, I can't stress it enough. There is no propane in an A2L system. Okay. There is not. All right. Aeon is going to 454B. Yeah. 454B is another one of the most popular A2L refrigerants right now. R32 and 454B are the two big wig ones, but there's definitely going to be some more coming down the pipeline. So there's a lot of misinformation. Yeah, got you. I hear what you're saying, Greg Austin. There you go. All right. Let me see what else we got going on in here. There you go. Yeah. So J.R. Smith says 410A is 50% R32 and 50% 125. And guess what? Here's another thing. R32 and 454B, they're already on the chopping block too, and we haven't even started really using them in mass quantities yet. Okay. Every flavor of refrigerant that we are using in one way or form or another is going to be replaced in the near future. Okay. So this is a perpetual machine that's just going to keep going and going and going. There's going to be a new flavor of refrigerant every single day. If the hippies have their way, we won't be having any refrigeration or air conditioning, period. Okay. So, all right. See what else we got going on in the chat. Anyone feel like a science experiment on an old 410A system? Hey, be careful if you do any of that stuff. So that's all I can say. All right. So I did a install video where I had a walk-in cooler that I had to do a retrofit replacement on. And I did a load calculation on the box. And then I replaced the equipment and I put a new evaporator and condenser on the roof. That was a video from like a week ago or something like that. And I used Heatcraft's new IFM, which is the intelligent field mount controller that mounts it on the outside of the box. And I got a lot of questions from those videos. If you watch the video to the end and watch my closing words on that video, you'll probably get a lot of your questions answered. But one of the biggest points of contention is that system had a Corel EEV, all right, electronic expansion valve. Why in the heck did I install a liquid line solenoid valve on that system? Excuse me. Why did I install a liquid line solenoid valve if it had an electronic expansion valve? First and foremost, I did not have to install the liquid line solenoid valve. The intelligent system with the Corel EEV, it closes the Corel EEV. It has a capacitor on there, so that way if there was a power outage or something like that, it would still close the valve down. The capacitor stores enough that it can shut the entire valve on shutdown. But why did I install a liquid line solenoid valve? Redundancy. That's exactly why. There's no other reason why than just pure redundancy. There is a dry contact on the IFM or the intelligent board, and it has a spot for a liquid line solenoid valve. So all I did was find a common leg, power the dry contact, and then sent power to the liquid line solenoid valve whenever it gets a call for cool. So it happens inside the intelligent board, and it's just part of the setup. So anytime there's a call for cool, it opens the liquid line solenoid valve and then modulates the EEV for the operation. And I just installed that for redundancy, just in case something ever happened with the liquid line solenoid valve. So that's the exact reason why I did. Ike, thanks for being a continued channel supporter for 42 months. You are a good friend, my friend, and I appreciate that. Okay. Let's see. Did the software have a selection for the floor type? And yes, I kind of glanced or, kind of breezed through the software when I was sizing the equipment. But yes, if you go back to my equipment sizing, I'm pretty sure I mentioned that I actually increased the floor temperature slightly because I set it as concrete, but because it was out in the Coachella Valley where they have extremely high temperatures, I think I raised the floor temperature by 5 degrees to like 65 or 70 degrees. I think it was factory set for 60 degrees. And it's very rare that we have a 60-degree ground temperature at that location. So I raised it, I think, up to 70 or 75 degrees for the ground temperature. So yes, you do have selection in there. It asks you what kind of floor you have. Another really big question that I got, and I actually brought this up to Heatcraft, and I've brought it up to other manufacturers too, and they are currently working on a quick fix. It was, there's a lot of people, even myself included, that can get a little confused when you're going through the load calculation software when it's concerned to, or when it's concerning ambient temperature, because inside the load calculation software, it asks you a few questions. Where's the box located, inside or outside? And I selected inside, but then it still says ambient temperature. So when you put the ambient temperature, when you really start thinking about it, what does it mean by ambient temperature? So I want to ask the chat right now, if I'm doing a load calculation on a walk-in cooler, and it asks me, is the box located inside the building or outside the building? But then it still asks for the ambient temperature, okay, in the load calculation software. What is it asking for when it comes to that ambient temperature? And I'll give you a hint. Ambient doesn't always have to mean outside, okay? Outside meaning outside in, up on the roof. So keep that in mind. So in the chat right now, yes, Johnny says that it's the kitchen temperature, and that is correct. So what it's asking for is the temperature where the door's at. When you open the door, what's the ambient temperature outside of the box? And I think I put 75 or 80 degrees, I think, or something like that, because that's the temperature in that kitchen. It's not a very good air-conditioned kitchen, so it's a little bit warm, okay? Now, when you're doing a load calculation in your software, as long as you select the box is inside the building, the only time that the actual outside air temperature on the roof comes into play is if you're putting your equipment up there, and that's with the derating of the condenser unit itself, okay? Excuse me. My nose is kind of congested right now, so I apologize about that. So with the condensing unit on the roof in the summertime, they actually have to derate. The BTU output on that condensing unit is actually going to drop based on the ambient conditions outside wherever the condensing unit is located. So if it is located on the roof, that doesn't factor into the actual load calculation, but in the condensing unit selection, when you're matching the equipment, when you're doing the equipment selection, that's when the outside air temperature is going to come into play. But the ambient temperature around the box in front of the door is definitely going to come into play when you're figuring out the required heat load to maintain the proper temperatures inside the box. So hopefully that makes sense. So, all right, reading through the chat right now. Where's the box located? That is correct, okay? So in my video, I think it was Sunday, I released a video where I was working on an air conditioner that had a grounded compressor. And boy, sometimes the comments are just kind of silly. Now, first and foremost, when I say this in these streams, I'm not the comments don't affect me. It just kind of makes me laugh sometimes because some of these comments are just so silly. I mean, so many keyboard warriors out there posting, because I posted a video where went up to a piece of equipment, it had no power. So the first thing I did was checked power at the unit. It had no power. We found out it had a tripped breaker. Before I reset the breaker, I was trying to find out why the breaker was tripped. So I was checking the unit to ground, and I found out that there was a potential, or there was a path to ground from the compressor terminal. But it was weird because there was a path to ground from both compressor terminals, two separate compressors. It wasn't a parallel system. They were two independent compressors. It was one circuit and two circuits. They were not piped together or anything like that. One of the compressors, well, both of them were testing. They had a path to ground from the meter, right? But the point I was making with the video, I certainly knew that whenever you want to test a compressor to ground, you want to pull the wires off the compressor, because if you test a compressor to ground and just assume that it's bad because there's a path to ground when the wires are connected, you know, you could have a bad wire. The wire could be grounded. Maybe the compressor itself isn't grounded. It just means that there's a path to ground. So in my troubleshooting, you remove the three-phase wires from the compressor and you continue to troubleshoot. And I found out that actually both compressors did not have a path to ground when I pulled the wires off. Only one compressor did. So one of the compressors was bad. It was grounded. The other one was actually backfeeding. And it was backfeeding because it was a 15-ton carrier split system that had 2-pole contactors on a 3-phase system. And then the internet's like, oh my gosh, like that's against the law. No, it's not. It's a really common thing that carrier units do. And it's not just carrier. Other manufacturers do it too. They're sharing a leg, right, to reduce having to have a 3-pole contactor inside of there. And it's just one of those things that they do. So the point that I was making in the video is if you just assume because the wires are connected that both compressors were bad, well, you'd assume incorrectly because only one was bad. Now, there was some good points made in the comments where people were saying I should have used a mega ohm meter insulation tester. Yeah, there's a valid point there. But I will say that when you have a direct short to ground, my normal field piece SC480 does just fine. Where an insulation tester would have been a decent thing, would have been to test the other compressor to see if there was any damage in it. I didn't do that, but also using an insulation tester on a scroll compressor can give you some skewed information, especially a scroll compressor that's been off for a very long time and that potentially has moisture in the system. You can get skewed information in there. So there's a whole conversation. There's a tech bulletin from Copeland. If you just Google Copeland scroll compressor insulation testing, I think it's like 1294. I think it's like in the 12s as their tech bulletin. And it kind of talks about why using an insulation tester on a scroll compressor for a one-time use is not the greatest idea. And that if you are going to use insulation testers or mega ohm meters on a scroll compressor, it should be done as trending data over a long period of time where you can take different variables. Because if you take the insulation resistance, if you want to break it down and make it even easier, if you take the resistance across the terminals, you got 3 terminals, right? A to B, let's just say it's 5, you know, and it's a 3-phase, so it should be 5 across all 3 terminals. But if you change the temperature at which that compressor is sitting in, that resistance value is going to change based on the temperature. So that's another thing to understand too. So that's why they say it's best to do insulation tests over a long period of time. So now that I'm going off on a rant about that, Will, again, thanks so much for being a member for so long too. That is really awesome of you, my friend. See what else we got going on in the chat. All right. I already covered that one. I already talked about the load calculation software, so that's good. So a lot, I did have not a lot of people, but one person asked this question, and I think it's very imperative. There is still people out there. And if you think this way, just know that it's not that you're a bad person, but you need to understand a little bit more about refrigeration, okay? Because there is some incorrect information out there. So when you are installing a walk-in cooler evaporator, there is a restrictor or an orifice that goes in after the expansion valve before the distributor. It's called a nozzle, okay? It is not a metering device, okay? It is a nozzle. And that nozzle is there to help to evenly distribute the refrigerant across the distribution tubes. You'll see them, and there's specific nozzle sizes that you have to select based on the tonnage and the temperature of the liquid refrigerant of the equipment, okay? So that nozzle is not a metering device. There was someone in my comments that said, hey, why are you installing a fixed orifice metering device after an expansion valve? And that's because it's supposed to be there. It's a device that's there in the system to make sure that the flow of refrigerant is distributed evenly amongst all the different feeder tubes that are coming out of that distributor after the TXV. Okay, so that nozzle is supposed to be there with the expansion valve, whether it be an electronic or a thermostatically controlled expansion valve. See what else we got going on there. All right. Why did I go? Oh, that's a really good question. So on that same video where I installed the Heatcraft equipment, why in the heck, I mentioned in the video, and this was a really good catch by someone. Someone said, because in the video, I went and I hung the coil with tech screws, and then I said, oh, I got to go to the hardware store and get bolts. Okay. So if I was so prepared for that job, Why didn't I bring the bolts with me to that job? Okay, so I live in a very urban area where we have Home Depots and supply houses everywhere. So oftentimes in that parking lot of that restaurant is a Home Depot. So oftentimes I don't sweat the small things. Like if I got to go get a 4x4 for the condense unit on the roof, or I got to go get some roof mastic, I don't mind running over to Home Depot while we're doing the job. Okay. Now, if I'm going out to a location that's way out in the boonies, of course, I'm going to try to take everything out there with me. But it's pretty common that I'm working in an area, oftentimes where Home Depots are in the parking lots of the restaurants that I'm working in, where I'm not going to sweat trying to bring every single item that I need for the entire job when I can just run over to Home Depot and get what I need on site. So that was the case. In the middle of the job, I left a couple other techs doing other things, and I ran over to Home Depot to go get some electrical fittings and some bolts to hang the coil with. And that's just because it was in the same parking lot as the restaurant. So. All right, I already talked about that. I had another really good question from a viewer of mine, and they brought up a really good point. They said, hey, when I use, because I'm always preaching that I love using the Refrigeration Technologies ice machine cleaner, right? So it's called the Viper ice machine cleaner from Refrigeration Technologies. It's a nickel safe ice machine cleaner, and I love using it on the Manitowoc ice machines when I'm working on them because I do a lot of Manitowoc ice machines. So the gentleman reached out to me and said, hey, he's been using the ice machine cleaner and he's noticing that the ice machine cleaner is foaming up like crazy and it's wreaking havoc on his system. And so at first it didn't make sense to me. I'm like, it's foaming up like crazy. So then I asked the gentleman, and again, I'm not criticizing you if you're watching right now, okay? I'm not criticizing. I'm just explaining to everybody so they can have an understanding. So, and I'll explain where I'm 99% sure your problem is, okay? And it's not your fault, okay? I'll tell you, it's the manufacturer's fault, not Refrigeration Technologies. It's the ice machine manufacturer's fault. But the gentleman says that he pours in the cleaner into the ice machine sump, and then when he's all done, he notices that there's a lot of foam happening, and it's causing issues with like probes and water level probes and different things like that, and it's just creating havoc. And he's noticing that it's been foaming up a lot, and he's just kind of curious about that. So at first, I couldn't understand. I'm like, foaming up ice machine cleaner. Now, I certainly get sanitizer that foams up, and that can be a headache, right? But then I started thinking, well, why on earth would the ice machine cleaner foam up? And why would that be a problem? Okay. But 99% sure I know what is happening here. So if you follow the manufacturer's instructions for cleaning the ice machine, okay, on a Manitowoc ice machine, Manitowoc says, put the machine into ice mode. And then when the displays tells you to add ice machine cleaner, you add the ice machine cleaner. And then the machine proceeds to rinse itself 5 times after it's done cleaning the machine. And then Manitowoc says you can put the machine back into normal operation. Manitowoc is dead wrong about that. They are 100% wrong. And Manitowoc lets their marketing department help them to set up their installation instructions and their ice machine cleaning instructions. If you take ice machine cleaner and you pour it into that machine, and then you think that because Manitowoc says you can, that you can put it into the ice mode after you're done cleaning that ice machine, they're incorrect, because every time you pour ice machine cleaner in that machine, you need to then, after the ice machine cleaner has circulated through the machine, you need to take all the ice machine cleaner out, take all the parts out, go take them to the dishwasher, scrub them down and clean them, and then put it all back together. So I'm pretty confident that the gentleman that asked me this question is following Manitowoc's instructions of simply just pouring the cleaner in there and then letting it rinse and starting the machine back up. And that is incorrect. And that's Manitowoc's fault for putting that information out there. Ice machine cleaner, when you just follow their installation instructions, it doesn't properly rinse the entire machine. There's going to be surfaces that still have ice machine cleaner on there. All it does is rinse the sump that the water sits in. It drains that and rinses it, but it certainly doesn't flush every single part out. And if you have the ice machine cleaner, it will kind of foam up a little bit as water is being circulated through the thing. And that's natural. That's any ice machine cleaner that's going to do that. So when you do an ice machine cleaning, there needs to be a teardown of the ice machine after you're done running the cleaner through it. And shame on the manufacturers out there for letting their marketing department help them to create these cleaning instructions, because every marketing department of these ice machine manufacturers, they want to try to make themselves different from every other manufacturer. So they're like, well, our cleaning's faster. You know, our machine's better and it's faster to clean, so it costs you less money. All that marketing information is a bunch of baloney and it's stupid. And I'm going to challenge you guys. Next time you're at an ice machine training class, and I'm actually going to be going to one here in about a couple weeks after I get back from a few events that I'm going to, I'm going to go to a Manitowoc ice machine class. And if any of you guys are watching this and you're at the ice machine class, I can guarantee you I'm going to ask that guy a question, because I love doing this at the training classes. Is I love saying, how long does it take to clean your ice machine, when I'm in front of a room of like 40, 50 people? And I love doing this because it makes the person that's giving the training class really be honest about it. And they say, well, you know, it says right here that it'll clean it in 17 minutes. And I say, no, that's not true. How long does it really take to clean your ice machine? If I tear it down completely and scrub and clean every single part in that ice machine, most of the time they'll hem and haw. And then finally they'll say, well, I mean, if you're going to tear it down, it probably takes 3 to 4 hours. Exactly. And then I'll say, put that in your marketing materials when you tell people how to clean your ice machines, because they're doing a disservice. What they're doing is they're letting the marketing department fill out that ice machine cleaning instructions. And then the customer thinks that their ice machine can be cleaned in 17 minutes. And that's baloney. That's absolute nonsense from the marketing department. So I'm pretty sure the gentleman that asked me the question about the foaming ice machine cleaner causing problems is because he's following the Manitowoc ice machines cleaning instructions, which is a bunch of baloney. So, Johnny Waterhand says, never had a Manitowoc foam up from using Manitowoc cleaner. Yeah, fair point. I don't know. I've never used Manitowoc ice machine cleaner. So, let's see. You get chewed out because you disassemble the unit to clean it. It's fun. 100% of the time. Yeah, I clean them too properly. Tear them down. What about mold? What are we breathing in? What about the mold? What are we breathing in? You know, a lot of people, and I say this quite often too, you know, people will criticize how dirty ice machines are. And like, ice machines really don't affect me. I mean, as long as there's not like literal growing mold on them, I'll still eat the ice out of them. Even the nasty ones at like Subways and stuff, I still go to Subway and I'll get ice too. I don't care, okay? Because that stuff that's growing in that ice machine is the same stuff that you're breathing. It really is. I mean, you know, if you've got buildup in your ice machine, like if you go to Subway, I don't do any work for Subways, but Subways are notorious for having like black slime and buildup in their machines. And it's because especially it used to be, they don't do it as much, but they used to actually make bread at Subways. Now they just pull it out, right? And then just throw it in an oven and it kind of bakes. But the yeast would get airborne and cause a lot of buildup in the ice machines and different things. So, you know, I feel like a lot of the people that freak out about ice machines are a little bit overhyped about that. So read through the chat right now. Did I see the new valve core removal tool from Field Piece? Yeah, I held it in my hand. It's big. It is really big. I do not own one. I do not work with Field Piece at this point in time. But when I picked it up, my first thought was, dang, this thing's big. Like, it's huge. I do appreciate, though, that it has multiple valves on it to close things off. I'm intrigued by it, so I'm probably going to purchase a couple of them and kind of test them out and see how I like them. But I'm intrigued by it. It looks pretty cool. They've done some cool things to kind of try to make sure that it grabs the Schrader core, which I do kind of like that idea. So I'll have to get one, you know, and actually use it out in the field to understand the operation, but it looks pretty neat. So, all right, let's see what else we got going on in the chat. Has anyone tried a cleaning product from Xanago for the moldy Hoshi clear pipes? No, I haven't. I haven't done that. Last I heard, Hoshizaki actually changed the color of their tubes. So that way you don't actually see the clear tube anymore and it won't be as dirty, right? I remember years and years ago, I was at a Hoshizaki training class and I said, why is it that you guys make your tubes clear? Because they get so dirty so fast. And he said, well, if we made them a color that you couldn't see through, then you would never change them. And I go, at first I thought that was like a marketing thing, but then you really think about it and it's like, no. If they made them the same black color that they make a lot of the other tubes, you would never see any dirtiness or nastiness in there. So the fact that they are clear allows you to see things that you couldn't see, you know, and you probably never would want to change. But in hindsight, they actually changed. Last I heard, they were changing a lot of the tubes to a darker color now. So interesting. What else we got going on in there? Thoughts on giving all my techs Amex cards. My techs all have Amex cards. We don't operate off of a PO system. All my technicians have credit cards. We don't use POs. We're a small company, but we have open accounts at our supply houses. And then all my technicians have Amex cards and they use them for gas cards and different things. And if you run that, you know, if you have trustworthy employees and stuff, it's actually really beneficial because the points that we get from our Amex cards as a company is insane. Like, because we run everything through our American Express cards and we pay it off every month. So just the points that we have are just ridiculously insane. All right, cool. What type of refrigerant is my favorite and what works the best? I mean, refrigerant is refrigerant. As long as it's designed, it does what it's supposed to do when it's supposed to do it. I really can't say that I have a favorite refrigerant. Um, refrigerant wouldn't be the thing that you would want to talk about. If you're talking about, like, a lot of people think that like R22 is the best refrigerant. No, I I mean, there's good things and bad things about the equipment. That's what you need to be concerned about. A lot of the equipment that we used R22 refrigerant in was not very efficient equipment. So it made it seem like it was an easy refrigerant to work with. But in reality, it was the equipment because you had a lot of wiggle room with charging and different things like that. And it wasn't as susceptible to problems because the equipment wasn't like super efficient. The more efficient you get, the smaller the thinner the copper gets, the bigger the coil gets, the more important it is to properly charge it. Then they start using other refrigerants to make them more efficient, and it just gets all crazy. And then, the slightest mistake that you make when you're working on a system just throws everything off. I wouldn't say it was necessarily the refrigerant that was easier. It was more the equipment was lower SEER rated, so it was a lot easier to work on and a lot easier to just not be absolutely perfect when you were fixing it. That's my 2 cents on the matter. So, all right. What brand of safety glasses do I wear? I have no affiliation with them, but there's a sunglass company, actually a floating sunglass company in Southern California called Bomber Eyewear. And they make sunglasses for like paddleboarding and stuff like that because they have like little foam pads on them. And I love their safety glasses and their sunglasses. They're ANSI approved sunglasses. So therefore they a tax write-off, right? They're polarized. I love polarized sunglasses. So I buy Bomber sunglasses that have clear safety lenses. And then they're also polarized dark colored glasses that I wear as my normal sunglasses. They're typically 60 to 70 bucks a pair for the sunglasses. And then the safety glasses are like 30 or 40 bucks a pair. And they're really nice glasses. That's what I tend to wear. But again, I have no affiliation with them. So let's see. Who's your daddy? She said that just bought 2 pairs of Bombers. Yeah, I like the Bomber ones. They're good. I call them throwaway glasses, right? Of course, I don't want to lose a pair, but if I do lose a pair, it's not a $250 pair of Oakley glasses or something like that, right? I don't even own nice sunglasses anymore. I just have the Bomber glasses, and I just buy them like 2-3 pairs at a time. 1 pair's in my work van, 1 pair's in my personal truck, and then I have a couple pairs of safety glasses here and there, and they work really good. Big, giant. I buy the ones with big lenses, so that way you got good exposure over your eyes and everything. They're great. So right on. All right. Well, let's see. What are my thoughts on the phase down of 410A? I'll close with this because we're going to close this out and it's time to end it. Every refrigerant that we are using now or in the foreseeable future is being phased out. Okay. The A2L refrigerants that we're going to be using in mass quantities in the next 5 to 10 years that are just going to be everywhere, those are already on the chopping block. They already have an end date. In European countries right now, they're already phasing out R32. We haven't even started really using it in mass quantities yet. But in Europe, they're already phasing it out. We are way behind the rest of the world, or at least the European countries, when it comes to refrigerant regulations. The best thing I can tell you out there is if you work with any refrigeration equipment, understand the operation and the temperatures at which that equipment operates at, because there's going to be a new flavor of refrigerant tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day. Don't be afraid of change. Embrace the change. Make a lot of money as all these changes come up, because that's the cool thing. As technicians, we got to constantly learn. We got to constantly evolve. And every time there's something new to learn is an opportunity for us as technicians to make more money. So that way we can make more or we can, provide for our family in a better way. And that's the awesome thing about this industry. It's ever changing. It's never going to stop changing. So don't stop learning. All right. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I really, really appreciate you all. Thank you so very much. And we will definitely catch you guys on the next one.